It's the Draftsmen Show.
Hey, Draftsmen Podcast. This is Paul. I've been teaching myself to draw for the past couple of years, and I just started the Proko Premium Figure Drawing course about 4 or 5 months ago. Definitely seeing an improvement, but I guess the question I want to ask is, at what point do I know that it's time to move to the next level? I downloaded the art model packs, and I follow a lot of the exercises, and it never really seems like the output of the exercises I'm doing is quite where I'd want them to be in order to move to the next level, so to speak.
Imposter syndrome.
So how do I know when I'm ready to push to the next level? Thank you.
You never know.
I got a quick answer.
Yeah.
It's when it's too easy.
That's too late. That's too late to move on. If that's what the rule people will follow, they're gonna spend a year on my bean exercise.
How do you mean?
Well, he's going through the figure course, right? So you start with gesture, then you move on to the bean. Mm-hmm. Actually, yeah, people would just keep doing gesture for years. When is gesture easy? After many, many years.
Okay.
Right? So it's going to take them several years to go through my figure drawing course? I don't know. I don't think so. I think you need to go through the whole thing, even when gesture isn't easy yet. You need to introduce yourself to the bean and the row bean, mannequinization, balance, all that stuff, and then go back and do it again and keep doing all those exercises. The figure course, or the anatomy course, most of the courses we're going to do are not meant to just be like, okay, you do this lesson and now you're a master at gesture. Not meant to be like that. Art, I mean, that's kind of the issue with the way colleges try to teach art, is that it's like you take a course once and you're done with it and then you don't do it again. Mm-hmm. But with the atelier system, or with good art schools like in St. Petersburg, they just do the same thing for 4 years. Mm-hmm. Because that's what it takes. But you're focusing on many different things while you're doing the same thing.
And you have a mentor there who's gradually easing you,
sure,
prodding you forward.
Yes, they do. But I mean, the same thing applies when you're doing it at home on your own. You're not just going to do gesture for like a month and then never do it again. You're going to be doing gesture for the next 20 years. I mean, for the rest of your life, you should. You should just constantly be practicing gesture. It's like it's a 2-minute sketch. It's like, if you're doing like a concept for an illustration, you might start with the really quick gesture of the pose you're thinking about, and there you go. That's your gesture. You're always doing that.
Here's something that goes back to the thing about when it gets too easy, you should move on.
Okay.
Dorian Eiton was the one who introduced me to this, but it was from someone else's teaching. It was from a book. I can't remember who, Carol Dweck maybe. There's an area where you're really comfortable, and there's an area where it'll break you apart. And it is where these things overlap. Enough comfort to feel like I can do it, and enough challenge to make me a little scared that I can't, where growth takes place.
Yeah.
That's why I suggested that when you say, I've got this, enough.
Yeah.
Move to something that's harder. And I don't think that it's wrong to have a plateau of comfort for a while. Say, hey, I'm just enjoying the fact that I can do this.
Yeah.
But you don't want to stay there if you're going to grow.
Yeah, if you want to grow, you don't stay there. If you're happy where you are, you could stay there. But I think that I would spend a maximum of 2 weeks on one of my lessons. Even if you're still kind of confused with gesture, move on to the bean. Spend most 2 weeks on it. Move on to the robo bean. Because sometimes the robo bean will help you understand the bean.
The idea is to keep moving so that one thing builds on another, rather than to stop.
Structure can help you understand gesture.
Yeah.
So if you're stuck on gesture, you don't want to move on to structure until you totally get structure. You're never going to get it.
Yeah.
Because these things are all intertwined.
There's also an argument to be made to always get the macro view first. If you go into a museum, particularly a big museum, and you just look at everything you're interested in, that can be very enjoyable, but it also can make it so that if you've got any kind of a time limit, you're never going to see the museum because you stop in one room. It's harder to do this, but to go into a museum and get the overview of the whole museum and limit yourself to say, I've got the whole look of this. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to selectively choose the areas that I will meander in and linger in. And I think it's that way with learning anything. That's why to look at the table of contents of a book before reading the book, and maybe even, it may seem crazy, but to spend 10 or 15 minutes just on that table of contents so that you can see whether this author has a train of thought that is really worth submitting to, can give you the macro view before you go in there and spend all that time on the micro view. You're getting a map of the forest before you go in and wander.
Yeah.
And
but even while you're wandering, don't camp out for too long.
Mm-hmm. But you designed that figure drawing course so that it does lead from one to another to another to another.
It does, but it's not meant to never revisit. It's more of like, it leads you to the next tool, the next exercise that you will be doing forever.
Yeah.
You're always going to have to keep thinking about mannequinization and structure. They're just fundamental things.
Writers talk about this in crafting a story, that if you're going to write a first draft, get through it. Mm-hmm. It's in contrast to the person who says, I've been working on my novel for the last 2 to 3 years and I've never gotten past the first page because I keep rewriting that paragraph to make it perfect. Well, there's no way you can get a macro view of it when you're stuck in one area. And the process of creating is related to the process of learning, that if you want to learn a discipline, to get that whole overview early on, then go back.
How many times have you gone over anatomy? Like just gone through the whole body and spent several days on each part? Mm-hmm. How many times have you gone back to relearn stuff?
Oh, when you say to relearn it,
for example, like the first time you're going through anatomy, you're completely clueless and you're just getting like very, very basic things about anatomy.
Yeah.
And then you probably took a break at some, for a little bit, and then you're like, ooh, I need to improve my anatomy. And then you went back and you relearned a little more.
Yeah.
And then you went back again and you learned more. Like, how many times do you think you've done that?
Oh, you mean with me? Yeah, I've taught it over 40 times.
Okay, so you were forced to just keep reiterating.
That's right, because that's my job.
Yeah, but every time you taught it, you probably got better at it yourself, right?
Well, not necessarily. Sometimes, but here's the thing, though, that in these last few stages, now, we've talked about this a number of times. Bridgman's stuff has me so excited about personalizing the forms. That's what makes me excited about it, is that I feel like you got the conscious competence. Wouldn't it be nice if you could then start to invent and try to get something that's personally exciting out of what you could do with the figures? But back to the he's talking about going through the figure drawing course.
Yeah.
If you're new to this, you figure how long did you design that course to be done?
6 months ish. But it depends. Depends on how many times you've already gone through it.
Yeah.
It depends on your current skill level. You could spend a few days on each lesson and go through it in a month if you've already been introduced to all these concepts and now you're just kind of using it to level up a little bit. It depends.
I'm trying to grasp at some kind of ideal way to prescribe the training.
There isn't. Why? Why are you trying to do that?
Because I'm compelled from internal motivations to make it so that this question is well answered.
Were you not happy with my answer? At most
I am.
2 weeks on each lesson.
Yeah.
And
2 weeks on each lesson adds up to 6 months? Or a year?
Probably more. But
about
that's
a year.
what I'm saying, at most.
Yeah. Well, in a life drawing class in a
definitely
college,
more.
Life drawing class in a college is what? About 4 months. And so to double that and say, I'm going to get this from the online course. I don't know any life drawing course in a college that can have that much dense information as what you've given. And that's the one you recommend for people to start with.
Yes, currently.
Yeah.
Once my basics course is out, you start with that one, then move on to figure.
Okay.
But right now, the figure drawing class is my most fundamental class. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So there's gesture, bean, robo bean, mannequinization, landmarks, balance, and then shading.
You had some anatomy in there too.
Landmarks, I think, was the only anatomy.
So what's the takeaway for this?
Don't think you have to be done with a lesson. You're not done with it. You're always gonna be improving on each one, even after you're onto the next one.
Yeah, think of it as like a cycle that keeps spinning instead of something that's a straight line.
And not even necessarily a cycle. It's not like you're only working on one. While you're working on mannequinization, you're gonna also be working on gesture at the same time, because mannequinizing the body involves also the pose. And the pose is heavily tied into the gesture of the pose. So you can't mannequinize the body without thinking a little bit of gesture. So you're not completely moving on. You're still going to be improving all the ones before it. You're still practicing them. So it's not a cycle where you just do one at a time. You're just adding another ball while you're juggling all these balls.
Low-doo-doo-doo-doo, low-doo-doo-doo-doo.